Waiters, waitresses on Reddit, be honest, how do you treat single diners differently? Story 1. When I worked as a waiter, I would prefer single patrons. They would be there to order food, eat, and leave, which resulted in a much higher turnaround, and at the end of the day, more total tips in my pocket. Story 2. I always treat single diners better than groups. They're always more friendly. Sometimes if a single man and a single woman come in, I try to sit them near each other in case they make eye contact, fall in love, and don't have to eat alone anymore. Story 3. I travel frequently, and not always to places I know people in. I've had nothing but positive experiences dining alone. My personal favorite was in Nice, France, where the waitress picked up the menu was on a chalkboard, sat it up on the table, sat opposite me, and walked me through the menu. Other than that, I've never been treated differently when dining alone. Story 4. I prefer single diners. Way less maintenance. Easy to joke around with and establish rapport. Sure, the tips might not be as big since it's a smaller check, but I'd rather have one patron than a family with 4 kids, or even 1 kid. TLDR, I hate kids. Story 5. Ain't need no biscuits. Biscuits is for families. It's very dependent on how the single diner is giving off body language. If they're wrapped up in a laptop and doing what appears to be business work or something of that nature. I typically shorten up my sales pitches and try to make sure that meal is as complete as can be without coming off as being overbearing or interrupting their work. If it's a single diner who comes in just reading a paper or toying around on a smartphone, and they do not appear to be in any rush whatsoever, I like to ask more personal questions like why they came in, what they're in town for, where they work, etc., etc. This is something I normally don't get into too much when there's a party of 2, because that's something that they're probably already talking about to one another. I've worked as a server for the past 6 years, and I can say I never truly treat any 2 tables the same. It's all about reading body language and adapting to how the guests react to whatever I'm doing for them. Some people, when they come in to dine, want to just get a meal, be treated nicely, and have everything go smoothly. Others are very open to entertainment and small talk, and generally like getting personal or sharing stories. The biggest thing about being a server is giving exceptional service, regardless of what someone looks like, smells like, acts like, etc. Just because that one shitty table you had came in and gave you an awful tip doesn't mean they didn't enjoy themselves. I like to think about it like maybe that's all they could afford due to medical bills or something going awful in their life. Sometimes people in those situations go out to eat to get away from everything else, and maybe they have an amazing time and only tip you 5 to 10, but they tell their rich friend John C. money's worth, and he comes in, requests you because his friend said you were great, orders a super expensive bottle of wine off the reserve list, and leaves you a 20 tip. I like to think karma works heavily in the waiting world. TLDR, I treat just about every table differently, regardless of table size. Story 6. If it's a lunch shift, they'll spend more time at the table and chat with single diners, especially if they're older or bringing a book to read sounds counterintuitive. But a simple, oh, I love that author. Have you read blah blah? Really works. Refill the coffee nice and often. Boom. Extra friendliness equals awesome tip. At night, ain't nobody got time for that. I treat them like everyone else. Okay. Hey, race your food. You doing all right? All right, cool. I got a screaming kid at table 3 who really needs his mac and cheese. I got to go yell at the kitchen again. Edit, I did not make myself clear. If someone has a book, I am not constantly badgering them and chatting the entire time my table is there. I make a brief comment when the person first sits down as a reader myself. I always love when someone asks what I'm reading and shows an interest, so I try to do the same. Story 7. When I'm on the road, I usually get dinner alone, but I sit in the bar. It's easier to dine alone if people just think you're an alcoholic. Sit in the regular section, and people will be like a sad man with nobody to dine out with. Story 8. That waitress was dumb. I prefer single patrons most of the time. There aren't enough people that eat by themselves. I end up talking to them a little bit longer than most people if it's not too busy, and if they want to have a conversation. It's also easier to remember one food and drink order, and I can usually run their food out myself since it may be just one plate. Cleanup isn't a problem either. Story 9. I'm a customer. I recently moved to my home country for college, and this one cashier at a cafe that I go to on a daily basis knows that I do not speak the native language very well. I guess the single thing counts since I have absolutely no friends here. You guys may think she's being nice because it's her job, but let me specify. This is an internet cafe. All the cashiers have to do is make sure customers are not damaging the computers, or if customers order snacks or drinks, they deliver it to the customer. And of course, man the cash register, this girl would greet me and at some points come up to me while I'm playing a game with my friends abroad and chat with me. At one point, she asked me if I wanted some of her dinner, although she's a complete stranger to me. I thought it was nice of her to offer me food. Sure, I may be a loser or a loner. It makes me feel better that I can talk to someone despite the fact that I'm really shy and there's already a communication barrier with everyone else in this country. Edit wrong word. Story 10, I worked at Red Lobster for around a year. At that specific Red Lobster, we were informed to only bring biscuits if requested. Bump that, I brought them biscuits, love biscuits. To answer the question, though, I knew some of my coworkers hated serving single diners on their own. It struck them as a waste of time. Personally, I enjoyed it, due to it either being an easy table or an interactive table. Often I would have conversations with the patrons about how life was. At Red Lobster, again, there was this one older lady who came in once a week. She would have the same meal with the same drink. She would tell the coolest stories of growing up, being married to a professor of Yale, going cross-country skiing, and stories of that sort. I didn't give her what she tipped because she was awesome. If you've ever seen Waiting, it was kind of like when that old dude sits at Ryan Reynolds' table. He mentions that it doesn't matter what the tip is. That dude was awesome. Incidentally, I hate to admit it, but if you haven't seen Waiting and want to see a slightly exaggerated picture of what the waiting industry is, see that movie. At various restaurants I work, coworkers would compare other coworkers to characters in that movie, oftentimes to a scary accuracy. Also, waiters and waitresses, please stop asking just one. When I walk in, I travel a lot, and this question is asked 50 of the times I come to eat. Nobody ever says just 2 or just 18. The just part in it kind of implies you're surprised that anybody wants to dine alone. Maybe I'm reading this wrong, but that's the impression I get. Edit okay, apparently I'm reading this wrong. Live and learn. Story 11, I treat them like any other customer. My boss loves lone diners. He says they come to your place not to socialize, but because they really want the food. I think he's a little out of touch. I always went out alone because I don't know how to cook, but okay. Sometimes they'll be a little chattier if they would like to chat, but Christ, I've had some people keep me at their table for a conversation when I have about a million other things to do. Anyone could do that, though. Story 12, as a single diner. I just want to point out how differently I experience my meal depending on whether I'm greeting with table for one versus just you tonight. Story 13, when I was a waitress and an old person came in, I was always so sad and thought their spouse had died, and they were lonely. One man came in 2 days a week, ordered the same thing every week. I always felt so bad for him until I found out his wife just didn't like breakfast, lol. Story 14, I prefer lone diners. It's much easier to connect with them, and they generally seem willing to be friendly and sociable, as opposed to groups, which often forget that servers are humans. This is also why I like eating alone, too. It's a great chance to have a conversation with a total stranger and not feel like a total stranger doing it. Story 15, each customer is different. When I had tables of 1, I would try to read them, just like tables of 2 or 3. If they were chatty or want to talk, I would spend some time there, just like bigger tables. If they brought a book and glasses, I would do more of a quick refill drop-by service. Making money waiting as a male is all about reading people and giving them what they want. If you cannot do this, you won't make any money. Making money as a female is about being attractive. Not fair, but that is how life works. Story 16, am always extra nice to lone diners, and usually try and have a chat with them if they want to. I know some people just want to be alone. There's a man who always comes into our place of a weekend. He's always on his own, and I always have a chat with him. I found out he hasn't been in the country long. He seems to appreciate having someone to chat with for 5 minutes. Story 17, this will almost surely get lost somewhere, and it's a bit off topic, but I would dine out by myself regularly during the summer of 2008 while I was taking a night class between my high school and my first semester of college. Once a week after my Monday or Wednesday class, I would go to a particular Steak and Shake and grab a burger, shake, or whatever I was in the mood for. It was almost always quiet, and there was almost always the same waiter there. I became a regular. He would guess my orders and we'd banter back and forth as he worked. One night, right after midterms, I came into SNS nearly in tears because of the 3-hour-long combined essay multiple choice test I'd just been subjected to. I was 18 and I'd never taken a college class before. I was mentally exhausted and terrified that I might have failed the test, something that I was sure would set the tone for my whole college experience. On top of all of that, my hand was cramping and my head hurt badly enough to make me feel sick. This waiter, whose name I can't remember, went to the back room and got some Tylenol and a glass of water, made me a strawberry milkshake, and brought out one of my usual orders before I could even ask him for anything. Then he sat down across from me and asked me about my day. Later, when I went to check out, I found out that Head given me his discount, and I just left the 20 on the table for him because it was the only money I had. He really deserved so much more because at that point in time, that was the single nicest thing anyone had ever done for me. I'm really glad that I was dining alone all those times I went to SNS because I wouldn't have gotten the opportunity to get to know that waiter like I did. He was a really cool guy. Story 18, single diners where I work are always marked as soigné, VIP. They get served an amuse-bouche on the house, the chef greets them, etc. We take extra care to ensure that their visit is perfect. Why? Because single diners in high-end restaurants are often reviewers, and as much as our chef denies it, He wants awards and acclaim, and he wants them bad. Story 19, I always give a single diner maybe a little extra attention to make sure they have a nice time. Since they don't have people with them to entertain, I will strike up small conversations. Why would anybody treat a person who is alone any different? Sometimes those are the people who leave the best tips, especially if you give good attention. Story 20, that's just a maneuver. The only way I ever treated solo eaters differently was offering them a newspaper or magazine if they didn't have anything else to do. I work chiefly in hotels, though, so more often than not, they'd be on a computer of some description. Story 21, the last time I went to my favorite restaurant alone, the waitress asked me what was wrong and why my GF wasn't with me. I then overheard her talking to the other waitress, gesturing at me, and saying something to the effect of it must be bad. He looks really upset. I just wanted a fish sandwich. Story 22, people come into restaurants alone for a lot of reasons. Sometimes they're traveling on business. Sometimes they want a quiet table to sit and read while they eat. Maybe they're lonely or just hungry and in a rush. Whatever the case, I have to assume that those people chose to dine out instead of ordering food and eating at home or in their hotel because they wanted some sort of human connection. This is the highlight of a server's career. A lot of guests have bad habits of forgetting that their servers are people, too, not just food-bringing robots. So it's always nice to know that someone came in specifically to engage you and maybe make a friend. I always give my single diners extra attention because whether you're in a group or alone, restaurant dining is about making a connection over food. A lot of single diners have the best stories to tell, and no one to tell them to. That old man who comes in every Wednesday afternoon. This may have been he and his wife's favorite restaurant for years and years. That young woman who looks a little lost, she just decided to move to a brand new town on a whim. Many servers groan over single diners because they generally make less money off of them. But all it takes is a little more diligence to figure out how to make a worthwhile connection. Some of the best tips I've gotten were from single diners because our interactions were more intimate. One of my favorite memories as a server was when, through talking to a man who came in alone, I discovered that he was alone in a foreign city on his birthday. We gave him free dessert, a chef's hat that part standard, and another table saw the celebration going on and called him over to their table. They ended up chatting a bit, too, and the man hugged me at the end of his meal. Single diners are one of my favorite parts about working in a restaurant because they're the ones who understand more than anyone that servers are fellow human beings worth engaging and befriending. Story 23, honestly, you should have called a manager over. I treat my one-tops like unicorns because if they're happy with the experience, they want to bring someone back with them. It happens so much where I work. Any server that would treat you like that is a lazy idiot that doesn't deserve the job. Story 24, I work at a Japanese sushi boat restaurant in San Francisco, and I always try to sit singles next to each other. The way the restaurant is laid out is a sushi bar surrounded by chairs in a circular manner. We can only fit about 30 people in at a time. Therefore, it's nearly impossible to not have a conversation with the persons next to you. I've definitely seen relationships start there. Story 25, things can get pretty slow at my work, so unless the kitchen has current orders, we verbal to them when we have a new table and how many people there are. So when we have a table of 4, we go to the kitchen and say table of 4. I find it almost humiliating to say table of 1 because if the restaurant is quiet, you can hear it from almost anywhere. So I always say 1 new or 1 open, even though it goes against policy. Story 26, it depends really. Some people I would give stuck up, some really sweet, I guess you get to know the person better, can make more jokes, offer personalized suggestions, but at the same time, usually waiters get X tables to serve. So singles are by default less pay for almost the same amount of work, so we need to prioritize our time. That being said, the granny's classy businessmen we would get for lunch were all awesome. Less money, but IDGF. Story 27, I eat out alone every workday. I think I get better service. I tip around 30, and they all know that I will drink a lot of tea, and that I want to go cup of tea, plus the girl servers flirt. Story 28, as a waitress, I always used to enjoy serving people who ate alone, because you very quickly know where you stand with them. Whether they sit, glance at the menu, and say hi yes, they'll just have the daily special and a tap water, thanks with a book or laptop straight out. You know they're going to be satisfied with a simple and prompt service without much fuss and minimal conversation. Let's face it, there's nothing more embarrassing for either party having to endure a conversation, especially when one has made it quite clear they want to be left alone. On the other hand, I always used to enjoy the customer who comes to dine and take in a different atmosphere from work or home, wants to chat, ask for recommendations, wants to know more about you, etc. It really used to change a rubbish shift into a pleasant evening. Story 29, as an Australian, for whom the word biscuit is roughly equivalent within U.S. terminology with cookie. This post reads like WHHHH. That mean waitress wouldn't give me a cookie storms out. Story 30. I don't know if it was because I was a teenager at the time or alone, but the waitress at this one place seemed to want me out as quick as possible. Never refilled my drink either. I didn't leave that great of a tip. Self-fulfilling prophecy right there. Story 31. When I used to get single customers, I would be a little more chatty than usual with them. IDKY. Maybe because in the back of my head in a skewed way I thought they wanted the company. Story 32. I've personally never been treated differently as a lone diner. I was in a job for some 5 years that was 100 out-of-state travel. Judging for what other servers here have said, it seems like I was the ideal customer. I would sit down, make a quick decision on what I was going to eat. I would try to minimize my mess so they wouldn't have to clean up after me. And there were times where I would ask to be seated at the bar or a smaller table, so I wasn't taking up a 4-person booth. Although I did wonder if other people thought that as a lone diner, if I was lonely or whatever. Story 33. I'm both a waiter and someone who genuinely enjoys having meals alone, not all the time. But sometimes it's nice, probably echoing a lot of what has been said. Generally, they tip well, don't linger, and you're not worried about timing visits so that they aren't mid-conversation. Overall, they're awesome, and single patrons probably get better service on average than couples or groups. Story 34. I've only done a short stint as a waiter in high school, but I don't think I treated them differently, maybe more talkative, but that's all. One exception is when someone looks like Husho was stood up, then I offer free dessert. They end up tipping me more, so it's not like I lost a lot of money doing so. Story 35. I usually had better conversations with single diners, couples, or groups want to talk to each other. But with one person, there's better chance of friendly banter, and therefore a bigger tip. Story 36. I'm always nicer to single patrons. Either I feel bad for them that they don't have anyone to go out with, or I applaud them for saying to all their friends that are too cheap to go out and go alone. I love going out alone. The servers pay more attention to me, and if I up, it's a better tip. On the other hand, rarely is their tab more than 20, so the tip won't be that good. Story 37. Most of the time, I feel sorry for them, especially if it's an older diner. I can't help but think they'd be there with their spouse if Husho was alive. Edit also, this might be relevant, not me, but if we're busy, the manager likes to seat them at tables in the bar area, which is louder and has a different aura. Likewise, the more experienced servers I work with hate taking these tables, because they'd rather make as much money as possible than have a chance to catch their breath. If we're on a pure rotation, a single can really throw off your count. Story 38. I feel like I'm actually kinder and more friendlier to single diners. I never know their circumstances, so I try to be as friendly and genuine as possible, although they may just be passing through on business. I do like to think that if they're just lonely, etc., that my sincerity and smile added something to their day. Story 39. That's extremely weird that she didn't want to give you biscuits. When I worked there, there was a huge heating tower thing that holds 15 pans with at least 30 biscuits each. We snacked on them when we were hungry, and there was always more than enough for customers. Story 40. The restaurant that I work at in Los Angeles has a very neighborhood-wide vibe. Okay, we have a lot of regulars, and a lot of those regulars mostly come in solo. So I tend to hang around their table and catch up with them, which results in other single diners at nearby tables chiming in on the conversation and making everyone feel welcome and friendly. Now, I'll admit that every once in a while you'll get that bitter and angry solo guest that hates the world and is going to take it out on their server. But those are pretty uncommon, at least in my experiences. In short, I feel that I typically give my solo guests more attention than I give an individual in a large group. Story 41. The responses to this topic make me want to curl up in my bed and cry at how much of a freak I apparently am. All of you, I spit in their food. That'll teach them to stop being alone, freaks. Story 42. Perspective from a customer here. When I go out to eat by myself, I generally sit at the bar because I can just walk right in and not worry about anything. But sometimes I just don't want to. I've found that 8 to 9 times out of 10 the server is more attentive in general after the first time coming by, because I tend to give them nonverbal cues like a thumbs up while they're walking towards me with that look, or a one finger up if I'm chewing, because it's impolite to speak with your mouth full, after which I apologize and ask for whatever I'm in need of. Usually it gets to me in under a minute if I'm having a drink and I'm done with my meal, but not the drink. I'll ask for the check and let them know that as soon as I'm done with the drink amount. I also tend to stack my plates and other refuse in an easy-to-carry manner. I worked in the food service industry once. Hellish experience, but I did learn a few things. Finish my drink, tip at least 20 if they did slightly above the bare minimum in terms of attention, and then I'm out if they take some time to talk to me or ask what I'm reading. Yeah, I'm that guy. Socially awkward, even when I want a steak, salad, and a beer, but fear being social, or just in general, make me feel like they want me to enjoy my meal. Doesn't take much, a smile and some chatter about how the meal tastes, and I'm good to go. then I will probably end up leaving anywhere from 25 to 40. And as a repeat customer, when the server, male or female, remembers me, they don't even need to know my name. Just recognize my face and say hi. Or ask how I'm doing. Yeah, I'm going to ask to be seated in your section. I'm going to give you a serious tip and GTFO so you can get that table filled with other randoms. Story 43, when I get single customers, they're usually regulars, old people, or both. And those are my three favorite types of customers. I usually talk to them more actual conversation, not just what can I get you. There's one regular, and old. He's my absolute favorite customer who once waited in my section for 9 more people to join him, and they never showed up. It was the saddest thing ever because he's so nice. I spent most of that time just talking to him and joking around, and it was awesome. We had a grand time. Story 44, single customers take way less effort, stay for less time, are usually nicer, and tip more. Sucks to have 16th of your section taken by one person, but they're usually your best customers. Also, I love eating by myself. Story 45, yeah, I treat singles better than groups, honestly. They tend to tip better. Then again, that was because I worked in a very urban area, and we got a lot of black people or foreigners in groups, and they either didn't understand the concept of tipping or just sucked at it. When we got singles, it was usually a businessman or some sort of employee who was on break. Since they were pushed for time, they usually know what they want, order fast, eat, and get out. Not being racist is a fact. Story 46, sometimes single diners can be the very best. I used to work at a burger place sit down, and there was a lady who came in, looked straight up homeless. Didn't seem quite sure where she was. Everyone ignored her. I figured she was just looking for a bite to eat. I offered to help her and sat her. I had assumed I was buying her meal at this point. She ordered with a bit of help. She didn't say a single word throughout her whole meal, but I made my best efforts to take good care of her. Towards the end, she asked for her check. I wasn't quite sure what to say. The last thing I wanted to do was insult someone by vocalizing my assumption that they can't pay for their own meal, but I didn't want to take money from her if she seriously was homeless and was in need of a meal. I had no choice as the managers happened to be actually doing their job at the moment, and I had to place the check on her table. Before I could set it down, she handed me a 20. Her meal was 9 and change. She gave me a huge smile and a quick hug and said, "You're the nicest waiter to have helped me." She came by every once in a while and refused service from other servers asking for me. She always left the best tips and was never difficult. I still don't know why she always looked homeless and hardly spoke a word, but I guess people are eccentric and you never really know what you'll get. Story 47, do you mean that you walked out on your tab because you didn't get any biscuits? Or do you mean that you didn't tip because you didn't get any biscuits? B, as a career waitress, I love single diners. They are generally less stress, less mess, and a higher check average. It's easier to gauge the level of interaction desired, and thus easier to provide the perfect dining experience, which is what I'm after. I literally want every person I serve to leave wanting to come back. See, how did you feel about dining in a solitary manner? Do you think that your attitude towards it reflected on your interactions with this server? D, how was your server feeling that day? Did you care? Do you think this matters if you completely walked out on your tab? You showed a person who at most makes $4.90 an hour who's boss. They probably paid for your meal. Small, locally operated restaurants don't 100% forgive walkouts, let alone national chains like Red Lobster. If you opted not to tip, that's your choice as a rule of thumb. Those who work for tips try to promote tip giving by means of bending over backwards for their customers. It's possible that there was some company policy in play that you were unaware of, which is not yours nor the server's fault. Also, at certain establishments, servers and bartenders pool tips. That means that by stiffing your server, you also stiff the bartender, the food runner, the bar back, the boozer, and sometimes even the cooks. Even if the establishment doesn't pool tips, your server tips out the boozer and bartender. So you screw over at least 2 other people who have nothing to do with your biscuits. Lastly, if you're rude and condescending to your server, it follows that you will probably get bad service. We're people, we have thoughts, emotions, and bad days. We're not servants or maids. Most of us want to bring you the best we have to offer, and we're working as hard as we can to do so. TLDR, examine your actions, and then examine mine. Story 48, be alone. Go to Red Lobster, be refused biscuits, angrily stand up and walk out. Hit true bottom, a pit of despair and loneliness, complain on Reddit, get internet points, get made fun of by a guy with an onomatopoeia-inspired name. Downvote him, feel smug sense of satisfaction. Forget about it within an hour, success. Story 49, I used to go to the same place for lunch for about 5 years. I ate the same thing every day, week work day, a taco salad. Had the same waiter. It got to the point where I just showed up, started reading the newspaper, The Signal, I guess. And my taco salad just showed up. I ate it, left the money on the table, and left. Not a word was spoken between me and the waiter. It was sublime. Also, if I go to a restaurant where they don't let you have a table or booth because you're single must eat at the bar, I walk out. Story 50, as a long-employed server and bartender, here are the basic 3 models I've encountered repeatedly in my time. The person who is there simply to eat and drink and wants solitude. You can spot the book or Kindle from across the room. They often decide what they want, or at least something to start before you get there. Keep the drink full and drop the check early, but don't skip any steps of service. The person who is there for some company, doesn't have anyone to go out with, but wants conversation or camaraderie. I often see these at the bar. They take immediate interest in what television stations are on, and are usually very friendly from the first moment they come in. Light chat and attentive service are key. Make them feel special. That who doesn't know how to order takeout? He knows what he wants when he walks in, and he doesn't know why it took you so long to greet him, and he's not sure he likes your attitude. That guy. Seriously, make him think twice about coming back. There's also the occasional weird who comes in on her phone, sits in a booth by herself, orders basically nothing, but is still somehow super high maintenance, and doesn't talk to you or really acknowledge you, but stops random coworkers walking by to tell them she needs something. These are rarer, and a delight when I find them. As long as you're polite, you can spend literally as much time as you want harassing them. In any event, a good server shouldn't treat a one-top any differently than any other table. Generally, these people eat and leave quickly, and as long as they tip well, I hope they return soon. If they're pleasant or funny, or both, all the better. I wish that I would be seated right at the front when I dine alone instead of hidden away in the back. I want everyone else to feel depressed just as much as I am. Story 51, single diners are my favorite. I'm always compelled to crack all my best jokes, such as, yes, Larb, it's an authentic Thai specialty. Your choice of meat cooked down with fresh mint from our garden. It's fantastic, I promise you'll larb it. And then I remember why I, too, eat most of my meals alone. Story 52, I treat them differently by giving them more attention. Groups are there to spend time with each other, so individual guests are usually more open for chatting. It's always fun to hear news stories. Story 53, I haven't been a waiter in years, but I can tell you that being a single diner didn't change how I treated you. What mattered most was the initial judgment I got from the customer when I first approached the table. To explain, everyone has a different idea about what a server should be like. Some people want the happy-go-lucky, talk your ear off server, while others want business first. Take your order, deliver your food, and never notice my presence sort of server and all the other possibilities in the middle. Every server has a natural tendency, and more professional than some of my old coworkers. Some did better with college-age tables, while others could handle kids and families like a god. So when you walked in and get seated, I'm immediately judging what best way to approach you. The first 5 seconds of interaction are done at a base level for me. From there, it'll shift my personality to match what I believe you want from a server. Single diners were the easiest to judge. I wasn't getting mixed signals from multiple people. I wasn't worried about working around an event like a birthday or first date, and most single diners were happy to chat for a bit without me feeling like I was ignoring someone else at the table. My favorite regulars, many of whom I still keep in contact years after I've quit, were single diners. Plus, you guys tend to tip better out of guilt at taking a table for only one. I worked in a restaurant where a lot of elderly people dined, often alone. I would always try to feel the customer out before I decided to act a certain way. Right off the bat, when you greet them, you can tell if they want to be left alone or if they would enjoy some company while they eat. If they didn't respond much to my initial introduction, I left them alone as much as possible while still providing good service. If they asked me questions and tried to start conversation, I would spend more time with them while serving them and try to befriend them. Story 54, I've been a waitress as a part-time job for 3 years. If someone comes in and eats alone, I usually don't have an issue with it. Yes, if I had a table for more than one person, my tip could be better, but I would treat the single customer no different. Recently, I had a single customer come in and order a martini, full-course meal, then dessert, so even though he was by himself, it was a bigger bill than most single patrons that ended up in a good tip. If I can sit there and make small talk, it also helps. So, again, no, I don't treat single customers differently than with 3 or 4 top. Story 55, I think it also depends on where you're working. For instance, I was a waitress for years and worked at a lot of different places. I worked for a small diner for a while, and it was the norm for people to dine alone. In these cases, I would treat them just like anyone else. However, I've also worked at Hooters. If someone came in alone, it's more likely that they want the attention of their server. In those cases, I would be more talkative. Hooters might be a bad example since more people are seeking that attention, but really any chain restaurant is like this.